This episode is brought to you by Google Gemini. With the Gemini app, you can talk live and have a real-time conversation with an AI assistant. It's great for all kinds of things, like if you want to practice for an upcoming interview, ask for advice on things to do in a new city, or brainstorm creative ideas. And by the way, this script was actually read by Gemini. Download the Gemini app for iOS and Android today. Must be 18 plus to use Gemini Live.
Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, FDA approved for over 20 years. So, talk to your specialist to see if Botox Cosmetic is right for you.
For full prescribing information, including boxed warning, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
Remember to ask for Botox Cosmetic by name. To see for yourself and learn more, visit BotoxCosmetic.com. That's BotoxCosmetic.com.
If you wanted to support me and also listen to every single episode of this podcast ad-free, then you can do so on Patreon, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. I will link to everything down in the show notes below. And if you wanted to support me for free, you can subscribe on YouTube. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, and welcome back to 3D Printing Basics. This is episode number 45, and in this episode, since we are around the holidays, I decided to make this episode all about things to look for if you are getting a 3D printer or if someone is gifting you a 3D printer and are asking for recommendations, or also if you're gifting a 3D printer to somebody else. These are just a list of points that I put together that are, in my opinion, important to look for when you are getting your own 3D printer. So with that being said, let's get right into it. The biggest factor that I believe comes with getting a 3D printer is going to be cost. There's a lot of 3D printers out there. They're all for different price points, ranging from I've seen printers for the $100 mark all the way up to the $1 million mark. Actually, look it up. But with that being said, you're going to have to know your budget and what kind of cost you're looking at. There's a lot of affordable printers that are under or around the $200 to $300 mark. And that's just something that you're going to have to kind of figure out what's your budget there, because I feel like you kind of have the sections. You have the categories of the $200 to $300 printers. You got the mid-range $500, $600 printers, and then you have the top of the line, the $1,000 to $1,500 printers, and everything else above that is kind of in a category of its own. So that's something that you're really going to have to look at, because there's a ton of choices out there, and just deciding how much you want to spend on a 3D printer is going to limit those. Not limit, but it's gonna shave down the number of choices you have and make it a little bit easier to select the right printer for you. And the next point that I want to talk about is, what are you going to be printing? Because not only is there a lot of printers out there, there's a lot of different types of printers between SLA, FDM, SLS. There's a lot of different types of printers, so you need to figure out what you're going to be printing. For example, if you're printing a lot of figurines, if you like games and you like anime and you like making those figurines, you're going to want to be looking at an SLA printer, because SLA printers, as I've said in my previous episodes, are really good at printing high detailed parts. If you are going to be doing something that is a little bit less detailed and a little bit more functional, like you want to use it in build, say if you're building a robot, if you're building an RC car, anything like that, then you're going to want to be looking into an FDM printer, because those prints can be much stronger coming off of the printer and are much more of an industrial use case. So that is probably the second biggest point, is you need to know what you or the person you're getting it for, what they are going to be printing, so you can get a printer that is optimized for their needs. The next point that I wanted to talk about is if you want to tinker with your printer or if you want to plug it in and use it right away. Me personally, I'm a plug and play kind of guy. I really like Bambu Lab printers because I plug them in and I start using them right away. I don't like building kits. I don't like upgrading or tinkering with my printers at all. But if you are somebody who likes to do that, who likes to mess around with their printers and kind of find out how they work, maybe upgrade some spots here or there, Bambu Labs is absolutely not the printer for you, because you quite literally can't really upgrade a single thing on it. None of it is open source. You can't really take it apart and see what's going on. You can't really upgrade anything. What you see is what you get, and it's what you're going to be able to use. If you are somebody who likes to tinker, or you're getting it for somebody who likes to tinker, then Creality is definitely the brand that you're going to want to go for, because that brand is known for having printers that can be easily upgradable. You can really take them apart and break them down. You can change them into completely different printers. There are brands out there who are literally built around upgrading Creality 3D printers to make entirely different 3D printers. For example, the Mercury 1.1 is just an upgraded Ender CR5, or excuse me, just an Ender 5. So just that's something to look for, especially just if you're going to tinker with it or if you're a plug and play kind of person. It can go either way. There's no right or wrong answer, but it's definitely something that's important to look for, because there are printers that are optimized for tinkering with them, and then there are printers that are optimized for just straight using them out of the box. This episode is brought to you by PCBWay. Ready to take your electronics projects to the next level? PCBWay offers everything you need, from custom PCBs to 3D printing and even CNC machining, all under one roof. They're trusted by engineers and makers worldwide for their exceptional quality and fast turnaround. And here's a special deal for listeners of 3D Printing Basics. Use the promo code 3DPrinting2, SQUARED, to get $10 off your first order. Start your next project with PCBWay and see the difference for yourself. Head over to PCBWay.com today. This episode is brought to you by Sculpteo. Are you ready to bring your 3D printing projects to life? Look no further than Sculpteo. Whether you're a hobbyist, designer, or business owner, Sculpteo's on-demand 3D printing service has you covered. With over 75 materials and finishes to choose from, Sculpteo helps turn your ideas into reality with precision and speed. Plus, as a listener of 3D Printing Basics, you get an exclusive deal. Use the promo code 3DP_basics_10% at checkout for 10% off your order. Don't wait. Take your creations to the next level with Sculpteo. The next point that I wanted to talk about kind of goes hand in hand with the tinker versus the plug and play, and that is if you are going to be using this printer a lot, or if you're going to only be using it a little bit. If you're somebody, for example, a woodworker who will use their 3D printer to complement their projects, but they're not going to be using it all the time, that could play into the printer that you want to get, because if you're only going to be using it some of the time and you only need it to do a very specific thing, then you can go a low cost, not low quality, but you can go with a printer that isn't as sturdily built, because you aren't going to be using it that much and you only need it to do that one specific thing. And if that one specific thing, you can find a printer that just does it good enough, and you can save yourself a lot of money and a lot of time doing that. But if you're somebody like me who's running their own 3D printing business, and these printers are going to be workhorses putting in thousands of print hours every single year, then that's going to play a big part. In my opinion, if you're going to be running your printers for thousands of hours every year, then a Creality Ender 3 is probably not the move for you. Those V wheels are going to disintegrate and it's not going to be good. So make sure, if you're going to be using your printer a lot, look into something that uses linear rails or maybe carbon rods, something other than those V wheel constructions, because I just have absolutely zero faith in those V wheels to be reliable in the long term. Another thing that's important to look at is where you're going to be keeping your 3D printer. 3D printers is definitely something that's susceptible to humidity, and it's susceptible to the temperature that it prints in. These kind of outside factors can affect the quality of your prints that you're getting out of your 3D printer. And so if you're going to be keeping this printer in a garage or something that's closer to outside and not as temperature controlled, then you might want to consider getting a fully enclosed printer. For example, the Bambu Labs printers, the P1P, the P1S, the X1C, all of those are fully enclosed, and they can regulate their own temperatures inside of their print space. Whereas if you get something that's a bed slinger, like a Creality Ender 3 or a Bambu Labs A1 Mini or A1, you won't be able to have any control on what kind of temperature gets printed in there. Now, you can fix that by just putting an enclosure over it. There are lots of aftermarket enclosures, so you can definitely look into that. But that's something that's very important to consider, is where you're going to be keeping this 3D printer, because I feel like most people keep 3D printers in their garage where it's not the most temperature or humidity controlled space, and that can easily affect your prints. So make sure you're considering that when you're considering getting your next or your first 3D printer. And that also leads into the next point between, are you going to get a bed slinger or are you going to get a Core XY printer? This point for me, I feel like it doesn't matter a whole lot. You can go either way. Typically, bed slingers are going to be cheaper than the Core XY printers, and the Core XY printers are going to have a little bit better quality and consistency than the bed slingers. But for me, the difference between the two is not great enough to kind of swing one way or the other. I've used both. I have both kinds of printers in my print farm. I use them on a almost daily basis. I use the Core XY printers on a daily basis, and I use the bed slingers that I have on an almost daily basis. And both of them turn out really high quality, really nice parts. So in my opinion, that doesn't matter too much, but it's still something that is going to be important. And now we're kind of moving on to the points that maybe don't matter so much, but they're more like perks of life. And one of those being the Wi-Fi connectivity options of the 3D printers. For me, I have my printers they're stored upstairs in a room, and going back and forth can sometimes be a pain. And that's because my office is downstairs and the 3D printer room is upstairs. So all my printers have come equipped with Wi-Fi connectivity to where I can start them all and I can monitor them all from my office downstairs. And while it may not seem like a big deal for somebody like me where 3D printing is my job, you can end up going up these stairs 10, 20 times a day. And I know it's not a big deal, and it really isn't, but for me, I like the added perk, of being able to start and monitor my prints from downstairs, and if there's a real big problem, then I can head upstairs and check on them. Another thing that kind of falls under that kind of category is sound. If you're going to be keeping this printer, say, in your home office, I know some people will keep them even in their bedrooms, whether your printer is quiet or loud can actually be a big thing, especially for somebody like me who I kept both printers in my bedroom, and I would try to run them at night, and I just couldn't. Obviously, I can't sleep when a printer is running right next to me, and I'm not sure if there's a printer out there now who even would change that. But just in day-to-day life, if you're trying to work at your desk and there's a 3D printer next to you that's whirring and buzzing, it might be difficult to concentrate on the work that you're trying to do. So that is something that could definitely be important to look into for you. The last thing I want to talk about is why power consumption should not be an issue. So I've had a few people ask me power consumption on printers and things that you should look out for, but at the end of the day, I've done some research and I've come to the conclusion that in the United States, it costs on average 6 cents per hour to run your 3D printer. Most of the power is being pulled when the 3D printer is heating up, when it's heating up the nozzle, when it's heating up the bed, and that accounts for a tiny, tiny fraction of print time. And the rest of the time, it's using very, very minimal power. So power consumption, while I understand how logically it might make sense, and it might make sense to be worried about it, I'm telling you now, don't worry about power consumption on your 3D printers. Unless you have 50 of them in your garage, you don't really need to worry about the cost and how it's going to affect your day-to-day life. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. I hope you now have some good insight, whether you are looking to buying a printer for yourself or whether you are buying one for a friend during this holiday season. I hope you now know what to look for and can get your friend or yourself the best possible printer for you. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate all of the support, and I will talk to you next time.